We heard it, we felt it, we saw it, but at the same time, are we coming back to that? I surely hope not. So the good news, we learned a lot. Some of it was good, some of it was bad, but we definitely learned a lot. And this is one of my favorites. We are cleaner through all of this. We've identified how to wash our hands, how to sanitize our work environment, how to identify a safe, clean environment out in public as well. And then, of course, we all learned the key message here is that we can make immediate changes. So for anybody out there that says that you can't make changes or you don't like change, I'm here to tell you, you did it and you did it on the fly and we rate it successful. So there is some additional good news. We united the world for common sense and a common cause to beat COVID. Now, I'm not here to talk about politics. I don't necessarily care where you stand, left, right, middle, it doesn't matter. We have full spectrums out there of what COVID really is. But the key is that we united together as a world to develop a solution to this. And then everyone did react very quickly, and the information was shared together. We helped each other out. We put the gloves down, and we ended up working together to find solutions. We definitely learned what is possible. And what is possible is that we can work from home, we can be remote, and we can be successful, as a matter of fact. The vaccine is well underway. We've all heard about the vaccine. Again, I believe I heard this morning that like half the country now, 50%, a little over 50%, is actually vaccinated. And again, I'm not here to debate whether or not you want to do it, is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is we're talking about statistics and facts. And again, just to reemphasize, we are cleaner and more hygienic through all of this for sure. So where there is a will, anything is possible. And, this is meant to be some tongue-in-cheek humor here, but I'm going to tell you, and just like people in safety and people in plants and in work environments, if you give somebody a task, they will find a solution. And we found this out. And these are actual photos. Now, they could have been some tongue-in-cheek humor and people having some fun with it. And I get it. I get it, right? You've got to have some humor in where we have been and what we've been through the last 18 months. So take it lightly, right? Take focus on the positive here. So some OSHA during COVID, they faced the challenges like the Bureau and all of us. They didn't know what to do and how to respond, so they locked everybody down as well. And they still receive complaints because there's still businesses that are working. As a matter of fact, the interesting note here is respirator use, no PPE, exposures to workplace illnesses. These things were complaints still coming into OSHA from those employees that were deemed essential and still working. And quite frankly, they saw a 15% increase in complaints. Working from home, they had a 15% increase in complaints. How does that happen? Well, the reality is that we were frustrated, and as workers, they were upset, and they had to go home. They had to do different things. They had to work long shifts and long hours and act in different manners. And so that resulted in complaints to OSHA. The key thing, though, is that with the 15% increase, they still saw 50% fewer inspections. And if you really think about, again, during the lockdown, OSHA wasn't traveling either. It was slowed dramatically. And the only people that were doing inspections were those that were mandated that they had to do the inspection. And that's usually due to something critical or high risk, and that had to take place. Nevertheless, they did 176 inspections, resulting in 295 violations. Now, these are the federal inspections that took place. And about half the states in the United States are federal states. The others are state-run plans, and look what they did. They did 756 inspections for 1,679 violations in this time period. So the answer here is that the states had a little more control and more ability to control what their state employees did versus the federal government trying to say all 50 states, here's what we're doing, because they locked down as well. So the state plans, there's actually 22 state plans that are out there. The ones closest to us are Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Maryland. Those are in our physical geographical area, if you will. And if you remember back in the day, if you're an old guy like me doing safety for a long time, you remember the phone and fax. OSHA used to fax you and tell you, hey, we had a complaint and you need to address this. You typically have 48 hours to respond back. Well, now they do emails, right? So it continues. The same things happened. And they were somewhat virtual, meaning that we had a complaint. This is what took place. And you have to respond back. Let us know facts, truthful, evidence, fake, whatever that it was. And it did require the employers to send in the information reply to OSHA with typically a 5-day response. So they gave you 5 days to do the investigation and get a response together. And depending on that response, OSHA may come out and do an inspection at your facility. I mean, obviously, depending on what was submitted back to them and the additional information in the complaint. But the interesting thing here, and at the same time, the sad part of where we are as safety professionals, the same type of injuries were still occurring during the lockdown. We still had falls. We still had people getting electrocuted, and we still had machinery issues with guarding and PPE violations. Now, if we can't do this during a pandemic when the majority of the country is shut down, locked at home, how do we ever suspect that we're going to fix this problem when we do go back to work? And this is an interesting challenge. And this is one of the concerns that OSHA had when I was speaking with them and getting some information. You know, what is it that you want people to know? And this was the key message here. The same exact hazards were still happening during the pandemic is what happens on a normal day prior. That's sad. So fatalities, formal complaints, referrals, program inspections, those are still the priority. You know, if there was a fatality that took place and it was work related, you can bet OSHA's coming out to do an inspection, even during the pandemic. And the ETS, or emergency temporary standard, well, that's now in place and quite frankly, potentially even enforceable because citations have been issued. And this looks at healthcare and similar workplaces. So if you have an occupational medical facility in your workplace, you fall underneath this emergency temporary standard. And it requires a COVID plan, safety coordinator, hazard assessment, monitoring, et cetera. And again, paid time off for employees and staff that are potentially sick or feeling with symptoms, and free PPE, which we all know we have to do anyways. And then of course, training on how to recognize COVID symptoms and or safety related issues and then eliminate them. Now, interesting enough as well, during all this, President Biden has proposed an 11% increase on OSHA enforcement and a 14% increase on compliance assistance. So compliance assistance is the state OSHA program where you can receive guidance and support from the state committees to be able to give you free support. And so that's actually a good thing, 14% increase. The Bureau of Workers' Comp and the state of Ohio's OSHA on-site consultation are both really good programs to get you some assistance. So question here, are you ready? So what I've done is I've put together a program, and this is a virtual inspection. So think about the following as I'm showing you these slides. And what do you see? What pops into your mind? Think about you're at your office and you get this email from the United States Department of Labor with these pictures. And it says, hey, got a complaint. Let me know what you think. How are you going to respond? And are you even able to identify the risk? So I think that with virtual training, I think this is going to be a lot of the things that we're going to have to learn to deal with. And how do we communicate? How do we share information? And how do we respond when we see things like this? So interactive as much as it can be. Obviously, we can't all speak up, but nevertheless, think about what we're looking at. So maybe you're popping into work in the morning and you see some contractors doing some repairs on your structure, and you've got the masons out there and some scaffolding in place, and this is what you're looking at. And yet you get that email that says, hey, got this picture from your facility, and I'd like you to respond to it. Well, this is stuff that we have to think about and consider. Missing guardrail. Is that a problem? Think about it. What about a worker could fall off of there, right? Is that an issue? Sure is. Standing on the X bracing, toe board missing where material can drop down to the lower areas, hard hat being worn backwards, overloaded scaffolding. These are all problems, aren't they? Are you guys still hearing me?
Yes, Scott, I can hear you.
Okay, my screen dropped off for some reason there. Okay, so scaffolding, definitely an issue. These are things that we need to think about, and things that if you have scaffolding on your site, you need to know and be aware of. Maybe you come into your lobby, and this is what you're looking at. You got two workers maybe doing some repairs, fixing a leak, something that might have happened. And when you think about looking at this, you don't have to worry about just employees, but you also have to worry about visitors and guests. Maybe this is in the restaurant or hotel industry where we have people from public applications. So we've got some drop hazards, PPE required. The gentleman on the lower level here is standing between two ladders, and then of course the guy on the right, you can't stand on the top cap or the top step, but he's standing on the top bucket on top of the top cap. So this is an issue as well. And then what about barricading the work area? Do our maintenance teams and facilities teams do this? Do we barricade those work areas appropriately so that they're not exposing risk to other people? So safety is the condition of being protected from or the unlikely event to cause danger, risk, or injury. And it's denoted by the ability to prevent the injury or damage as a state of being safe. So the key here is to prevent any possible injury potential, and you're going to be safe through this. You're also going to be in compliance because regulatory standards were written because of people receiving injury or dying. So preventing injuries is the compliance. And then, of course, minimizing the potential risk of something bad happening, that's the key. So you've heard before, safety is not rocket science, and it really isn't. As a matter of fact, in our company of 1,100 employees, I tell every one of them, I need 1,100 safety champions, people that can recognize and avoid danger. You don't have to know the code, prevent the potential injury. So maybe you're in your shop area, or maybe out in your operations, and you see this situation. Now, not only am I a safety professional, but I'm retired from the fire department after 35 years. So, this makes me cringe for the simple fact of looking at this. I mean, we've got an accessible cabinet. Is it accessible? It's got a gate on it and a door locked. I mean, how you can get the fire extinguisher out when the building's on fire, or to put out a machine or something to control fire that's in the incipient stage? So again, a problem. Theft is an issue. Deal with the theft, right? Don't lock the cabinet up. So again, a common one I see a lot of times when I'm out in shops and machine areas. We've got an employee that's doing some obvious work here and exposing himself to risk. But when you see this, don't get caught up on the fact of the sparks. We get drawn, our eyes get drawn to one thing. Think about the employee, the face shield. How are we going to protect the face from maybe that disc or those sparks from coming apart and impacting his face and causing injury? And the glasses, they may be side shields and maybe not. It's a little hard to tell in the video, but definitely the FR jacket, or we call them greenies, that he's wearing is incorrect. It's unbuttoned. That hoodie is not fire retardant. As a matter of fact, I had a friend's company that had an injury because an employee was wearing a hoodie and sparks got into the pocket of it and caught on fire and burned his shirt off. And then, of course, thinking about the flying sparks that create a fire hazard or are impacting people, maybe walking to the left of that screen down an aisleway, possibly. Now, I know maybe some people don't like the fire extinguisher or, in plain view. And so they hide it, right? You hide it. It's ugly right there. So we put a nice sign on it, let it snow. Well, maybe you don't like snow either. But, the key thing here is that we should not impede any type of a fire suppression system. And that includes exits, doors, it could be fire extinguishers, it could be alarm systems, sprinkler heads, whatever that it may be for emergency and life safety with fire. They cannot be impeded. They got to be in plain sight. And even decorating for the Christmas party, don't do it. So successful safety starts with you setting a good example. Nothing is worse than when somebody does something wrong and the first thing they do is they point it out and they say, well, Scott's not doing it. Well, how does that help? So you need to be the successful person here. You need to be able to do the right thing. And then definitely focusing on teaching and educating people about identifying risk. So, the old adage is that you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And that means that sometimes instead of yelling at somebody, put your hard hat on or put your glasses on, maybe it's an explanation as to why they have to do that. Well, because the code says doesn't work. People want to know, they want to learn, they want to recognize. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to teach that person to recognize danger. So the code is not dangerous to them. That's a violation. Quite frankly, what's the chances of OSHA coming in is probably pretty minimal, but the chance of an injury occurring is very high. So I apologize for this one. This one got a little bit blurry when I blew it up, but I think you could probably pick out some definite things here. That's some examples. So maybe you've got your delivery person coming in. This could be UPS. It could be your shop person carrying materials and delivering into the warehouse. And when we see things like this, are we truly putting our best step forward? And when you think about this, we've got a cart that's on a corner that is a trip hazard. We've got the sign laying on the ground as a slip hazard. Cords across the aisleway, which are obviously trip hazards, as well as a platform that's a transitional problem. And if you think about slips, trips, and falls as our #1 injury potential in all businesses, these are multiple examples of why we have situations like this. Carrying material even to where you can't see and you're trying to peek around the boxes is a bad idea. Now, you got to put the safety reminder up on the building. And, we do this, but you got to do it right. It goes back to that example I mentioned earlier that you've got to set the right tone. You've got to be the example to others. And when we've got a forklift raised up in the air with a wooden pallet on it and a worker standing there putting a sign up, is that setting the right tone? And because people know this stuff, they know what they're required to do, but yet somebody else isn't. And this is an important thing to remember when we're out there. So fall protection and operator training and making sure that we're doing the right things here. But that platform is not an acceptable platform underneath of the guidelines and standards. So I don't think this is a good idea at all, and we should be doing things differently. So some things to remember here while we're continuing. There is no perfect person or perfect workplace. And it took me a lot of years to figure this out. I used to ask people, why would you do that? And yet, the reason is that just like me, we make mistakes. We have bad moments in judgment. And this is what leads us to a potential problem. And Rome was not built in a day, and it's not going to get fixed in a day. It took time to get broken, and it's going to take time to get it fixed. And just like the old adage is, again, to eat an elephant takes one bite at a time. So prioritize your focus on the big things that you have in your facility. What's going to potentially get somebody killed? That needs eliminated. After that, we need to think about what can cause serious potential injuries. And that's where we need to look at. So this is your manufacturing facility and your shop floor again. Maybe you got some contractors in. Are you responsible for the contractors? You sure are. And anybody that's on your property, you're responsible for, just like your homeowners. Somebody comes over to swim in your pool, you're responsible for that person. And here's an example where we've got some, an elevated work area that we need to access, but maybe they can't move the lift over close enough because of the way the machining is configured. But when we think about the perspective here, we've got a ladder and a lift, first of all, that's a prohibited violation here. The chain gate is not latched, which is the guardrail completion. We've got a tip moment of an extension ladder where an employee's out on the end of that. Not only could the ladder tip, but it could pull the lift over as well. Now we're falling down on equipment and materials and processes, and that guardrail below them is not going to fare well for anybody. So, think about the things that we do. And again, this will go back to a previous earlier statement. If there's a will, there's a way. These workers needed to do this task, and this was what they deemed as the best way to get it done at that time. Not the right way, but the best way in their mind. So changing a person saves one, but changing a culture saves many. And I'm going to tell you, cultures are hard to change. It's hard to crack that nut. And you can't do it alone. It's going to take everyone to get involved. And by that, I mean everyone, from the CEO all the way down to the person that just walked in the plant today. Every individual has a voice. So try to seek to understand what's happening and why it's happening before you pass judgment. A worker does not put their hand into a machine knowing that they can lose it because of a piece of equipment or operations or process. They do it because they're trying to keep the wheels on the bus turning, and they made a bad decision in an instantaneous time. So ask them, what would make you do that? Or why do you think that is acceptable? And lastly, is that the way you were trained? Training is an easy violation under OSHA. And quite frankly, because the OSHA comes back and says there's no employee that would do that. They obviously were not trained correctly. Well, this one's a little harder to identify, but what you're looking at is the top left here, or top in the center rather, is a tool with a GFCI cord attachment built into it. Got an extension cord on the lower left, and then you've got probably a two-way charger or radio maybe plugged in on the bottom. But the orange thing in the middle is what we call a three-way cheater. It's an adapter to be able to plug three devices into one. Well, we know some things right off the bat. If you look, and I'll move my mouse over here, if you look right here, this is a ground pin of this cheater, and the ground pin is broken off and missing. Well, that's a problem. If there's no path to ground, you become the path to ground. But then also look at this extension cord that's plugged into this cheater. Is that correct? And it's not, because if it was correct, this is where the ground pin would insert. So this cord is actually, or the cheater, one or the other, has the ability to be reversed. So you could be damaging equipment, but also the fact that the ground's missing is incorrect. So we've got a lot of problems with this one as well. And it definitely leads us to think about the two-way cord at the bottom. You know, we're required to have three-way cords that are all grounded, but in a two-way situation like this is a double insulated, and you can determine it's double insulated because it'll be identified, it'll say double insulated, or it's going to have a square symbol with another square inside of that. And this is one of my favorites. I see this all the time, extension cords with electrical tape on it. Now, the standard actually permits you to make a prepare for that shift, but it cannot have any inner wires damaged. Well, first of all, two things come to mind. Is this resulted in a repair that occurred during this shift? Well, most likely not. I mean, there's a lot of dust on the tape. It obviously looks a little bit frazzled. You know, this is something that happened many, many days ago and is still in continual use. But take the tape off. If the inner wires are damaged, this is a complete improper repair. So that leads to a lot of problems, but it definitely goes back to the main one here. There's no daily inspection of the tools, equipment, and processes that are in use. The employee plugging and using this cord is required to inspect it and make sure that they do it correctly. They obviously didn't do that. So here's our fall protection. And when we think about fall protection, you know, we know in general industry, it's 4 feet, in construction, it's 6 feet, and, you know, the 5,000-pound anchor point and things of that sort. But do we know everything that needs to go into the little pieces? Do your workers understand that hooking 2 self-retracting lifelines to 1 anchor point is a violation? That means that that anchor point and plate would have to support 10,000 pounds of force, or 6,000 pounds in a fall restraint situation. So those 8 screws in there, is that enough to support that 6,000 pounds? And I can assure you it's not. So these are things to think about. But definitely, where's the competent person that's required to be engaged with the fall protection? And this person is obviously not present because we're not identifying correct procedures here. You know, the equipment's not being properly inspected, maintained, or cared for, and there's a lot of questions. So some wisdom. No one got up and went to work expected to get hurt today. Not one of us. Police officers, I get it. They put their lives on the line every day. But the rest of us, we don't do that. And remember, you're a coach, a teacher, an encourager. You're not the enforcer or the punisher of the OSHA standards and regulations. And we all make mistakes, and that includes you, me, and everybody. You know, so how can we learn from that? Now, if it's a repeated bad mistake, then that's a problem. We got to deal with that. But give everybody an opportunity to coach and teach them the right way. So some hazard recognition. And this is a big one of mine. I love to teach hazard recognition. So I love to talk about why things are broken. And if it's a situation capable of causing injury, well, that's something we need to focus on. Or obviously, if a death can occur, that's got to be eliminated. No questions asked. If your company says it's a hazard, then it's a hazard, regardless of what the OSHA standards say. And that's a hard one for a lot of people to understand. And if there is a federal, state, or local rule identifying it as a hazard or violation, then obviously it's an issue. So safety isn't rocket science again. If it looks bad, it probably is bad. If it can cause an injury, it needs to be eliminated. So think about some questions that you might have. Think about something from this presentation that might have jogged your memory, or think about maybe how you're going to handle the inspection. And this is something that we need to think about, and we need to be prepared for. Who knows how long COVID is going to last? Who knows what's the next challenge and that's going to come across our desk? But we definitely learned something in the last 18 months, and that is to think about the potential. Nobody figured that there would be a pandemic the size that we had that could have ever occurred. I can assure you, if it did, all of our insurance companies would have had indemnifications and riders out there preventing it. So nevertheless, think about what we need to do differently and put it on your plate to be able to determine what is next at your facility. That's what I've got today.
All right. Thanks, Scott. I'm going to take back control of the screen here. Maybe. All right. I know I have stuff. Bear with me just a second here.
Sure.
All right. Let's get through there. Okay, so we've come to the end of our second monthly meeting. So I'm glad that you were all here to join us this morning. Again, here's Scott's information. You will get this in your email as well, either today or tomorrow. Again, there will be the $100 Chamber gift certificate drawing. And if anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to email me. And my email address is there. There will also be a meeting evaluation survey that will be sent out. If you could please fill that out if you have any input. And then our next meeting is on September 14th at 8 a.m. We're going to be talking about mental health and safety in the workplace with Katie Tumbaugh from the Wellness Collective. And she spoke at Ohio Safety Congress before. So that's how we got in touch with her. So obviously that's a very relevant topic, and we hope you're all able to join us for that. Again, thanks for being here, and please be safe about your day. Take care.
I just noticed my email should be R Goodwin, the letter R. So when you send that out.
I apologize. I'll
No,
update
you're
that
fine.
before.
It's easy to do because I go by Scott.
I know. I thought I copied and pasted it, but probably thought I knew what I was doing.
That's all
so,
right.
Yeah, so I'll update that before I send that out to everybody. But thanks for pointing that out.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it. Have a great day. Enjoy.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dean.